Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, what's up? McJibbin here, back to another Russian video. Alright, potential newcomers, I'd love you to join the channel. We learn about history through YouTube, world history, trying to connect it all together through YouTube videos, your guys' recommendations, and your explanations in the comments. So I'd love you guys to join, slap that like button, that subscribe button, like button too. You know, pull up a chair. Old subscribers, my loyal subscribers, be nice and make some room. All right, let's do. Who recommended this to me? I'll find it. All right, I'll find it. How you guys doing today? All right, you doing good? Here. Hope you're doing good. If you're doing bad, then, well, that's bad. But I hope you're good soon. All right. I care about my viewers. All right. It's this one. I know it's this one. The top of the description below. Ironclad HD. Eastern Front animated World War II by Eastory. Okay, let's do it. Everything's all set. Everything's all set. Thanks again to whoever pointed out some videos. My the window capture for you know, in the bottom right of your screen for the original YouTube video was kind of off the screen, and I think I fixed that, so thanks for that. Whoever you were, whoever you are, everything's good. Let's go. Eastern Front was notoriously brutal.
Europe, summer 1941. Germany had secured most of Central and Western Europe, with only Great Britain remaining defiant on the islands. The only potential threat to Germany in Europe was its former ally, the Soviet Union. In order to break the stalemate with Britain and make Germany's strategic position indisputable, Hitler decided to cripple the military capabilities of the Soviet Union and seize its natural resources. Germany planned to achieve this goal by capturing most of the European part of the Soviet Union before the onset of winter 1941. The main attack would take place in the center and be directed towards Moscow, with auxiliary attacks in the north and south. By the middle of June 1941, the Germans had almost completed the preparations and the invasion was about to begin. Meanwhile, the Soviet forces were unaware of what was coming and were ill-prepared to resist the German invasion. First, we'll look at the southern sector. The Soviets had deployed their strongest units in the south.
I believe Hitler sent 3 prongs, one to Kiev, one straight to Moscow, I think through Minsk, and one towards St. Petersburg. I could be extremely wrong with that.
1,200,000 men between the Pripyat marches and the Black Sea. They were to be confronted by the Army Group South that was of roughly the same strength. The first objective of the Axis troops was securing the western Ukraine. On June 22nd, the invasion began. The Soviets immediately gathered their armored forces and met the German spearhead with a massive counterattack in the area of Dubno and Brody. But due to the lack of combat readiness of the units involved, it failed, and the Soviets lost most of their tanks. The German advance continued, and this created a threat of encirclement to the Soviet troops in the south, and they had to be withdrawn from the exposed position. After the main attack had tied down the Soviet reserves, the Axis forces in Romania joined the offensive. The main spearhead now made a dash towards the east, and this made Soviet command think that the main German effort was directed towards Kiev. However, the Germans had stuck to their original plan and turned south. When the Soviets realized the German intentions, it was already too late to withdraw their forces, and the Germans encircled and destroyed many of the Soviet formations near the town of Uman. The Soviets now abandoned western Ukraine and retreated to the eastern bank of the river Dnieper. They deployed the first wave of freshly mobilized troops to establish a strong defense on the river line and also cling to the port of Odessa. At the same time, operations were being carried out in
channel,
north,
guys.
where 1.5 million German
Thanks
soldiers
for
from
the
army groups
recommendation.
north and
I talked
center
over
were
him,
facing
sorry.
1 million Soviet soldiers. In the beginning of the invasion, the Army Group Center was to encircle Soviet forces at the border and then advance towards Smolensk and Moscow. Meanwhile, Army Group North was to advance directly towards Leningrad, threatening to trap the Soviet forces between them and the sea.
That's what it's
On
saying
June
now.
22nd, the Germans attacked. The Soviet Western Front was deployed forward, and during the first days of the
I just want to say sorry for pausing again, but I know Stalingrad. It's kind of when I think of, like, if you ask me, what do you think was if you had to say the most brutal battle of World War II, I would say Stalingrad would come to mind.
war, the German forces encircled most of its formations near the towns of Bialystok and Minsk. In the Baltics, the Soviet counterattacks were defeated in the Battle of Raseiniai, and then they attempted to pull back and establish a defensive line on Daugava River. But the Germans reached the river before them and pushed onwards, threatening the Soviet units in the west with encirclement. At the same time, Army Group Center had finished encircling the Soviet Western Front, and its infantry units began to reduce the pockets, while its armored forces advanced eastwards almost unopposed. The Soviets attempted to plug the gap by deploying most of their pre-war reserves to counter them, but it was not enough, and as the German offensive continued, their armor broke through the Soviet lines and trapped these units near Smolensk.
Wait, I'm sorry. I was going to give credit to the channel. Original video at the top of the description below. Check them out. Sorry.
By that time, the first wave of Soviet mobilization was complete, and the Soviets continued. Their armor broke through the Soviet lines and trapped these units near Smolensk. By that time, the first wave of Soviet mobilization was complete, and the Soviets used these formations to block further German advance and attempted to free the encircled troops. However, the performance of these newly created units was lackluster, and they were unable to liberate the pocket. The Germans managed to close it up and eliminate it. The Germans had gained the upper hand in the central part of the front, and now they were faced with two options. They could continue the push towards Moscow immediately, or secure the flanks of Army Group Center
Guys,
first.
can I get a I think it's really important for me to get a I'm going to put display capture on, so you should be able to see my full display. What should I search? I want to get a sense of just the scale of the area of these places, the size of these places.
Well, we're waiting.
Okay, so here's the U.S. So they're fighting, and this is great because it shows you how in regular mercantile, the regular flat maps, obviously the more north or the more way south you go, they distort it. This is great. So the truesizeof.com if you guys want to check this out. Look how big Africa is. Okay, so I'm on the East Coast. I'm in New England, which is right here. So from Berlin to Moscow is about, and you guys can see this, right? Yeah, you can. Is about, that's like me traveling to like Kansas. That is super far away. And obviously the battleground is around Minsk, and that's you put Texas in there, California. It's a very large area. Sorry, we'll get back to it.
Towards Moscow immediately, secure the flanks of Army Group Center first, and then continue the offensive eastwards. They decided to do the latter, and the armored formations of Army Group Center were sent to aid neighboring army groups. During this time, battles had been raging in the north, where Army Group North had failed to pull out large encirclements, and their progress was slowed down by the Soviet counterattacks and bad infrastructure. Nevertheless, they were making slow but steady progress, and after securing their left flank, they reached the approaches to Leningrad. When the help from Army Group Center arrived, they were able to perform the final push and cut off the land-based communications to the city. Further north, Finland had entered the war against the Soviet Union on June 25th, and the Finnish troops took advantage of the Soviet defeats by taking back the lands lost in the Winter War. After
Very
that,
cool
they established
map
forward
animation.
defensive positions between the lakes. Even further north, the Finnish and German troops attempted to capture the Soviet port city of Murmansk and cut the Murmansk railway in order to sever the Allied supply route to the Soviet Union. However, their attacks became...
There's a funny and cool video on the channel Quixer, I think QXIR, about a German soldier, or was it a Finnish soldier on meth or a Swedish? I don't know, something like that, but it's really funny. Check it out. That's off topic, kind
sever
of.
the Allied supply route to the Soviet Union. However, their attacks became bogged down in the rough terrain short of their objectives. The front became static. Meanwhile, the other armored units of the Army Group Center were sent to help Army Group South. The Soviets had anticipated that the Germans would continue their attack towards Moscow and concentrated their troops on this direction, which allowed the German armored formations to push back the weaker Soviet units on their southern flank. The German advance southwards forced the Soviets to abandon their forward positions.
Guys, how are they just... I guess I know the answer. I get Russia is not... I was going to say, how is it that... You know, World War II, I feel like, is one area of history where I can... I feel like I'm pretty confident in talking about a few things and giving my own input, but just the quickness, it seems to be probably pretty easy terrain. In fact, I know it must be a easy terrain to kind of go over with the Panzers, but it's just crazy how fast they advance.
Pripyat marshes to shorten their line. In Ukraine, the Soviet troops were occupying a strong defensive position with their flanks resting on the Dnieper River in the west and south and the marshes in the north. Yet, the panzers from Army Group Center were bypassing the marshes from the east and advanced into the Soviet rear. The Soviets thought that the German spearhead was overextended and could be contained. However, unbeknownst to them, the armored formations of the Army Group South had secretly crossed the Dnieper from the south into a German breachhead and now broke through towards north to link up with the spearhead.
Look at that, it just
As the
keeps
groups met,
eating it
most
up.
of the Soviet units in the central Ukraine became encircled. 750,000 men were trapped in the pocket. When the pocket...
So again, I just want to use all my new little tools here. So it's kind of like they yeah, I can draw here. It's like they move their armies around. They might probably like do a little faux, or not faux, but put some here, and then they kind of cave in here, and this little thing here just gets encircled, and then they just take all of it, and then they continue, go around, encircle. There's the pocket of Russians, and then swallow them. Just that continued strategy. It's cool.
It had been liquidated, the Soviet forces in Ukraine had been severely weakened. After these operations, the flanks of Army Group Center were secure, but now the Germans didn't have enough time to reach the objectives set in the beginning of the campaign, and they decided to go for more limited goals. In order to reach them, they began a full-scale attack along the whole front.
Look at how
in the
big
south, the
Russia
Soviet
is.
resistance
Oh
had
my
been crippled
God.
with the recent encirclement, and this allowed the Germans to carry out another encirclement, trapping part of the Soviet forces on the coast of the Black Sea. Then they pushed onwards and established their control over the resource-rich areas of the eastern Ukraine and conquered the Crimean Peninsula, with Soviets abandoning Odessa but clinging on to the port of Sevastopol. At the same time, the German forces were pursuing their objectives in the north. Their goal was to sever the remaining supply route to Leningrad and link up with the Finnish forces. The initial advance was successful and reached its first goal by cutting the railway line supplying the city. The main German effort was in the center. All this time, the Soviets had anticipated an attack on Moscow and had...
So I have a question for you guys. Are these all rail lines, or are these highways? I kind of say highways because I know, you know, the German Autobahn is in probably the best shape of any highway in the world. Maybe America has better highways or something at this point. But are these kind of train lines, tracks, or just kind of regular, you know, just roads?
Deployed 1,250,000 mobilized troops to the sector. During the German operations on the flanks, they had even somewhat managed to push Army Group Center back to improve their defensive perimeter, but by the end of September, the German armor had finally returned to the center and proceeded to carry out a new attack. Once again, near the towns of Vyazma and Bryansk, the Soviet troops were encircled, and this resulted in halving the Soviet strength on the front. After reducing the pockets, the Germans closed their distance to Moscow. Then they attempted to encircle Moscow with a two-pronged attack, but by that time the long advance had exhausted their offensive capabilities and the weather had become severely cold.
The Soviets have a best friend that nobody else has. Like, I kind of consider the United States' best friends to be the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, and we have very either militarily weak or just friendly, passive people to the, we have Canada to the north and Mexico, and then Latin South America to the south. But Russia's great big friend of nature is the winter, and I can see that, like, it gets really cold in the Northeast here. Don't get me wrong, but it's the worst winters I tend to hear are in the Midwest, where there is just very far removed from any kind of coastal weather, any coasts that can kind of bring in warmer weather from other places, and just so much flat land leading up to colder climates. And so when the winter comes, it gets super, super cold. And this must be like that around Moscow and stuff in northern Russia, like that on steroids. So big friend to Russia.
The Soviets managed to halt their
and
advance.
Most people learn very quickly about that.
And although they didn't have large superiority in numbers, the Soviet proficiency in winter combat allowed them to carry out a counterattack. The Germans were forced to abandon their vulnerable forward positions on the flanks and pulled back in order to shorten the front line. During the retreat, they had to abandon some of their heavy equipment. At the same time, the German attempt to cut off Leningrad had also failed, and they had to retreat to their starting positions, and the supply line to Leningrad was restored. In the south, the German advance was also checked by the Soviets, forcing the Germans to abandon their forward positions in Rostov. The first year of the war...
Yeah, this video is almost over. There's no way this is a one-parter, and I think someone else said that this isn't, so obviously going to check out the next parts. Great channel.
The first year of the war was to abandon their forward positions in Rostov. The first year of the war was over. The Soviets had stopped the Germans far from their initial goals, but at a great cost to their own military capabilities. The Red Army had been decimated, and it would take a year or more to fully rebuild and re-equip the army. The Germans wanted to use this window of opportunity and were sending most of their available forces to the Eastern Front to deliver a knockout punch in the following year.
Look, I'm an American, all right? I love America. But, that being said, Russia, I say a lot, I bring up the point how, it was Stalin and Hitler who signed a pact. Everyone considers, there was Germany going in, Hitler going into the Sudetenland, which I believe is like the outskirts of then Czechoslovakia that were on the borders of Germany, and then annexing Austria, which was very easy. And then Chamberlain left because was replaced by Churchill because Hitler continued to go through Czechoslovakia, and so that can sort of be considered the start of the war. But most people, at least in Western education, see the invasion of Poland as that red line, the start of World War II. And it wasn't just Hitler that invaded Poland. It was Hitler and Soviet Russia. It wasn't just the Nazis. It were the Soviets and the Nazis that had that. So you can argue that wasn't very, the start of the war, but they made the pact to do that. And that being said, again, Russia, so many people died, not just to win the war and everything, of course, to win the war, but look, right there, they all these troops that went over that the Soviets killed and were killed by, and all the attention, it enabled D-Day. I know D-Day isn't for a few more years, but just the amount of troops that were there to defend Europe and the French coast, and just the Western Front was only possible because of what the Russians were capable of doing and holding out and suffering and dealing damage to the Germans. That helped everything. And how the hell is Sweden not in this? I knew Switzerland and Spain weren't in it. Ireland, I guess, probably just is in one of the many fits against Great Britain and just doesn't want anything to do with anything Great Britain is doing. And you got Sweden here, not
1942 would be the decisive year of the war.
Oh, Patreon support. Go check them out. Awesome video, awesome channel, Eastory. Go check them out. Thanks for the recommendation. Obviously, there are more parts to this. Yep, I can see one right here. And I'll check that one out too. Keep recommending. I'll see you guys next time.